It was the scent that told me first, not the usual bitterness of French roast, not the faint sweetness Craig liked to add when he thought I wasn't paying attention. No, this had an edge, something metallic, like wet coins pressed into warm ceramic, the kind of smell that doesn't belong in coffee, or kitchens, or anywhere near a breakfast table lined with linen napkins and fake smiles. I didn't flinch, didn't wrinkle my nose, just smiled and accepted the cup like I always did, like a good wife, like a quiet, grateful woman who'd learned how to sip suspicion and smile through it. Craig leaned in with that practiced tenderness, his hand brushing my back, as he whispered, "Extra strong today. Just how you like it." His breath still smelled like mint from the rinse he always used. When he was hiding something, I said thank you. Not because I believed him, but because I'd already stopped believing long ago. You don't call someone a liar every morning and expect to live in peace. You nod, you play your part, you wait. Marla was talking too loudly about the renovations again, polished quartz, imported tile, whatever latest proof of success she needed to drape over her insecurities. Her laugh cut the room like ice shards. It always did. She adored being the hostess, the one who ordered catering, but arranged the fruit platter herself just to say she did. Her husband, Todd, barely spoke. Their daughter, Lily, sat buried in her phone, scrolling through a world where none of us mattered. I lifted the cup. I didn't drink. Just let the rim rest against my lips. While I scanned the room, no one was watching. That's when I stood. Half step back, turn of the ankle. A small gasp. Oops. The cup slipped from my fingers, but didn't fall. I caught it midair. Clumsy Helena, always a little off balance. Marla jumped, hand outstretched, reflexive. That's all I needed. My other hand, the one no one was looking at, brushed against her untouched cup, sitting just beside the mimosa pitcher. Switch. No drama. No mess. I slid back into my seat and thanked Craig again, murmuring about caffeine and deadlines. Marla raised her own cup, took a generous sip. I smiled, just a little. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I needed to know, needed confirmation of what my body had been screaming for months. Something was wrong, and it wasn't me. She coughed once, twice, tried to cover it with a laugh, but her hand trembled. Her voice cracked on the next sentence. Something about basil plants? I think. Then she dropped her spoon. It clattered against her plate and silenced the table. Marla Todd leaned forward. She waved him off. Just a little. Tickle. Her pupils were already beginning to dilate. Her skin lost color with unnatural speed. Craig stood slowly. He wasn't reaching for her. He was watching me. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overthinking or hormonal or paranoid or sensitive. I wasn't sick because of stress or diet or bad genetics. I was sick because someone wanted me that way. The first time, it had been a rash that spread up my arms after a dinner at Marla's place. The second, a stomach virus that landed me in the ER 48 hours after Craig insisted I try his immunity smoothie. Doctors couldn't explain the recurring infections, the unexplained fevers, the way my energy vanished overnight. I tried to chart it, journal it, meditate it away. But this was the proof I hadn't dared to believe I needed. Marla was gripping the table now, her breath shallow. Craig reached for his phone. I think we should call someone. I stood. Calm. Measured. Call 911, he blinked. It's probably nothing. She's turning blue. Craig. Panic started to slip through the cracks in his mask. Good. I stepped into the hallway under the guise of giving space, but I didn't go far. I turned. slowly, silently. Through the gap in the archway, I watched as Marla collapsed forward. Craig didn't rush to catch her. He stepped back. Todd caught her instead. Lily screamed. And in that chaos, Craig muttered something low, too low for most to hear. But I caught it. He said, "It wasn't supposed to be her." My fingers closed around the small voice recorder in my jacket pocket. I'd started carrying it 3 weeks ago. Just in case. Just for moments like this. I pressed stop. Saved the file. My hands didn't shake. Back in the dining room, Marla was on the floor. Todd was yelling for someone to bring water. Craig was pacing, face pale. No one looked at me. That was fine. I didn't need them to. In the soft, chaotic hum of a family meal gone wrong, I walked quietly to the powder room, locked the door, opened my email, and typed 3 words to my attorney. It's starting now. The door to the powder room had no lock. It clicked shut, but never truly sealed. That detail had always bothered me. Now, it comforted me. They would assume I needed a moment, that I was overwhelmed, maybe queasy, that I would return shaken, still manageable, still the same woman who smiled through suspicion and tucked her spine into polite silence. They had no idea what I'd just set in motion. I hit send. Watched the email disappear into the encrypted server I'd set up 6 months ago, during one of Craig's business trips. The kind where he stayed 2 nights longer than planned, came back smelling faintly of new cologne and someone else's shampoo. I never asked. I didn't need the details. I needed leverage. Outside the door, footsteps shuffled. A voice Todd's low and urgent. She's not responding. We need to move now. Good. I flushed the toilet for show, ran cold water over my hands, checked my reflection. No tears. No tremble. Just me. Just Helena. The woman everyone had underestimated. The woman Craig thought he could slowly dismantle professionally, physically, emotionally without consequence. I stepped back into the hallway just as the paramedics arrived. Marla was on the floor, her body limp, her mouth slightly open, and eyes wide with confusion that hadn't yet turned into fear. They strapped her to the gurney. As questions flew, what did she eat? What medications? Any allergies? Craig fumbled for answers, his voice too loud, too eager, overcompensating. A salesman pitching a lie. I didn't interrupt, just stood behind the paramedics and watched him spin. Every word he spoke was further evidence. Every panicked gesture, the layer peeled back. She drank coffee. I offered, softly. Craig made it. We all had some. That turned a few heads. A medic glanced down at the remaining cups, then back at me. Which one, I'm not sure. I lied, smiling slightly. We passed them around. You know how brunch is, everything's shared. Craig didn't speak. They wheeled Marla out. Todd followed, white-knuckled, and silent. Lily stayed behind, her face pale. She stared at her phone, then up at me. Something flickered in her eyes. Not trust. Not warmth. Something closer to calculation. Like she'd just realized she had underestimated me on 2. Back home. I didn't rest. I didn't wait. I sat at my desk, pulled up the encrypted cloud, and began uploading the folder labeled, "If They Ever Try It." It had everything screenshots of texts. Craig forgot I could access through our family account. Bank statements showing odd withdrawals lining up with my hospital visits, audio snippets conversations I recorded, when I pretended to sleep, when I stepped out of the room but left my phone behind, voice memos from whispered arguments between Craig and Marla, caught through thin walls and vent ducts. None of it damning on its own, but together it painted a masterpiece of malice. Months ago, I would have talked myself out of it. Would have asked, what if I'm wrong. But after the third ER visit, after the moment I collapsed during a client presentation with no clear cause, after my physician gently asked if I was under unusual stress, I stopped doubting my instincts. Women are taught to doubt themselves, to be polite, to shrink discomfort into silence. I'd spent 12 years practicing that. I was done. The coffee was never meant for Marla. It was meant for me. She was collateral. A misstep, one they would never recover from. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I watched the footage from the brunch. Yes, I had recorded it, not for sentiment, but as part of a documentation habit I began months ago. I reviewed Craig's face in freeze frames, the moment his gaze snapped to the wrong cup, the flicker of panic behind his calm, the subtle way he stepped back when Marla collapsed. He hadn't called for help. He hadn't moved. He had waited. I zoomed in on that frame and saved it as Exhibit A. By morning, the hospital called. Marla had stabilized, but was being held under observation. Toxicology would take a few days. Tightier, but the attending physician and old friend from my undergrad days had already seen enough to raise flags. I thanked him, told him I was fine, told him I'd come in for a full panel, voluntarily. Helena, the cooperative wife, the calm observer, the one with nothing to hide. I wore a light blue blouse, no jewelry, hair tied back, neutral, respectable. I brought every medical record from the last 2 years in a crisp, labeled folder, laid it on the nurse's desk like an offering. My blood was drawn. My story, not yet told, lingered in the air around me like static. Then, before leaving, I opened the patient feedback kiosk, pressed staff, exceptional, and smiled for the camera. Surveillance. After all, works both ways. Craig didn't come home that night. No calls, no texts, just silence. The kind that used to make me worry. That used to make me pace the floor. Imagine accidents. Imagine affairs. Imagine some version of him I could rescue, if only I loved him better. But I didn't pace this time. I didn't wait by the window. I poured myself a glass of still water. Not wine on my mind needed clarity. And I sat in the living room with every lamp turned off, letting the quiet stretch out around me like a second skin. It was strange how natural the stillness felt now. A few months ago, I would have filled it with background noise, classical music, news anchors, the hum of a diffuser. But silence became my teacher, my ally. In silence, I had begun to see things, patterns, shifts, the way Craig's left eye twitched when he lied. How Marla always changed the subject. When anyone mentioned my agency's campaigns, little things, but little things. Repeated enough, become architecture. They build a structure strong enough to trap even the most practiced manipulators. The next morning, I woke before dawn. No dreams, no grogginess, just the smooth certainty of purpose moving beneath my skin. I showered, dressed, not for court, not yet, but for war. A sleek black turtleneck, tailored slacks, hair pinned tight. I looked like someone capable of burning down a life and not blinking. And maybe I was. Craig finally walked in at 7:43 a.m. He didn't have the decency to look disheveled. His shirt was pressed, shoes clean, jaw freshly shaved. A man who still believed he could fix this with charm, with damage control. "You're up early," he said, setting his keys down like it was any other Tuesday. I didn't sleep. He paused, searched my face for signs of emotion. There were none. I'd emptied them out the night before like draining poison from a wound. "They said Marla's stable," he added, cautiously. "It's good news." Is it a flicker in his eyes? That millisecond where the body reacts before the lie has formed? I mean, yes. Of course. They're doing more tests. It might have been food poisoning. I tilted my head slightly. Strange. We all ate the same food. He didn't respond. I let the silence expand, let it wrap around him until he started shifting his weight. Glancing at the door, the clock, the window anywhere, but me. Then, I spoke. I spoke with the hospital. They're running toxicology. They seemed interested in the coffee. Now he met my gaze, and I saw it fear, sharpened into calculation. Not guilt. Never guilt with men like Craig. Only the fear of consequences. You think I would, Helena? Come on, that's insane. Is it I love you? You love my connections, my reputation, my agency. You love the idea of me at your side. When you close a deal, you love my restraint, my silence. He opened his mouth, closed it. You don't love me, I said softly. And that's fine. I don't need you to, I just need you to be scared. He took a step forward. I didn't move. He stopped. You're blowing this out of proportion. We're under a lot of stress. Your pitch next week, Marla's pressure, maybe you're not thinking clearly. There it was. The tactic. Undermine her mind. Frame the woman's clarity as fragility. A playbook. So old it should have been laughable. I smiled. Slowly. You should pack a bag. His jaw tightened. What are you talking about? The police are coming. I gave them everything. He laughed. The sound was hollow. You're bluffing. Am I? He stared at me. Not like a husband. Not even like a man. Like a cornered animal trying to decide whether to lunge or run. You have no idea what you're doing. Helena. I stepped forward now. Just one pace. Close enough for him to see the detail in my eyes. The steel. The quiet. I know exactly what I'm doing. And so do you. That's why you're shaking. And he was just slightly... A tremor in his hand he tried to hide by sliding it into his pocket. You're going to regret this? No, I said, you are. The doorbell rang. A crisp, polite knock. Craig turned white. I walked to the door, opened it without looking back. 2 officers stood there, calm, professional. I stepped aside. He's in the kitchen. I said, and even as they passed me, I didn't smile, didn't smirk. I simply exhaled. Justice doesn't need a show. Sometimes it just needs a door to open. The kitchen felt colder once he was gone. Not physically, but in the way a house remembers things. The air, no longer disturbed by his footsteps. His voice, his presence. It was as if the walls themselves exhaled. As if they too had been holding their breath for years. I sat at the counter, exactly where he used to drop his briefcase every night, and opened my laptop. The inbox was full. Journalists reaching out. A couple of concerned board members, 1 email from our largest client, subject line checking in, and 1 from my attorney, no subject, just a locked PDF attachment. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I clicked on the security footage folder. It was all there. The brunch, the swap, Marla's collapse, Craig's freeze, every expression, every move. I watched it again. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to feel it, to memorize the moment it all changed. Not when the coffee cup passed between hands, but the exact second Craig realized control was no longer his. I paused on his face, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, body frozen, while everyone else moved. And I saved it, labeled it the moment he knew. Then, I opened the PDF. My lawyer had been fast, efficient. The official report from the toxicology lab was attached. Restricted compounds, not available over the counter. Trace elements found in Marla's blood that matched residue on the rim of the coffee cup. Compound X127, mild enough to simulate illness, strong enough to incapacitate someone for days if dosed correctly, illegal in the U.S., except in tightly regulated medical trials. And I had months of medical records documenting similar symptoms always after meals, or drinks Craig had made himself. Included were the audio clips I'd submitted Marla's muttered panic. It wasn't supposed to be me. Craig's whispered reassurances. Text messages he sent her with time-stamped promises like, she won't be able to leave bed, let alone pitch. And just a few days of rest then we're in. It was all there. I forwarded the package to the lead investigator. No message. Just a silent transfer of truth. By the time I arrived at the hospital that afternoon, the news had already spread. I walked past reporters with sunglasses on, chin high, steps even. I wasn't hiding. I was arriving. Quiet power doesn't announce itself, it is simply felt. Inside. Marla was sitting up in bed, a nurse checking her vitals. Her skin looked sallow, her hair slightly damp from sweat, but her eyes were alert. Alert and terrified. She flinched when she saw me. Relax, I said, setting my bag down gently. I'm not here to gloat. She didn't respond. I brought you something. From the bag, I pulled a small silver recorder. Set it on the table next to her bed. Pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Weak. Strained. It wasn't supposed to be me. She reached for the stop button. But I caught her hand. Listen. More audio. Craig's voice. Promising her she'd get half the contract if I didn't make it to the agency pitch. Their plan, so thinly veiled, so sloppily layered in arrogance. I didn't know, she said, her voice hoarse. He said it would just keep you home. You believed him. She looked away. I have your voice. I have his texts. I have 12 years of files and a federal attorney who doesn't blink. Marla's shoulders sank. For a moment, she looked younger, smaller, like a child caught stealing, too ashamed to cry. Why didn't you stop us sooner? She asked. I leaned forward, voice soft. Because I needed to be sure. And because timing is everything. She closed her eyes. And for once, she didn't speak. I stood, walked to the door, then turned back. You'll recover, I said. You'll have years to think about it. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to justify, but I was already gone. In the hallway, the detective was waiting. Everything matches? He said. It's airtight. I know. Do you want to add anything? I handed him a flash drive. It's all there. Interviews, recordings. He wanted to discredit me. She wanted the client. They nearly succeeded. And now, I said. They'll have plenty of time to explain themselves. To a judge. He nodded. No further questions? I stepped out into the parking lot. The sun was setting. A perfect line of gold across the tops of parked cars. I didn't feel relief, or joy, or triumph. Just stillness. And I realized for the first time in years that I didn't feel watched. The agency didn't ask questions when I returned. They didn't dare. Not after the headlines, not after the footage, not after the silent, lethal precision with which I had dismantled the story everyone thought they knew about me. They welcomed me with applause, with flowers, with small talk veiled in admiration and fear. That was the thing about power. Once you prove you're willing to use it quietly, legally, surgically, people stop underestimating you, and they start watching their own backs. My office hadn't changed. Same glass desk, same clean lines, but someone had replaced the photograph on the bookshelf. It used to be Craig and me at the firm's 10th anniversary gala. Now it was just me alone on stage, holding the Platinum Pitch Award. I didn't ask who made the switch. I didn't need to. The pitch Craig and Marla had tried to steal was still mine. I'd rewritten the proposal 3 nights before the brunch, stayed up past midnight, changing the narrative structure, the metrics, even the client's core KPIs. A strategic overhaul Craig knew nothing about, but because he hadn't cared to ask. He assumed I'd lean on old templates. But I don't repeat myself. I evolve. The client didn't just stay. They doubled their contract. My first meeting back was with them Crescent Edge Media, a tech giant with a reputation for sharpness and zero tolerance for scandal. They didn't bring up the arrests or the courtroom coverage. They only cared about results, and results were something I had in spades. Your delivery was impeccable, said their CEO, a woman I'd always respected. Frankly, Helena, we didn't know whether you'd pull through. We considered postponing. I met her eyes. That's the thing about setbacks. They're only real if you acknowledge them. She smiled. You're colder than I remembered. Survival, I replied, requires more than warmth. After the meeting, I closed the conference room door and sat in the silence. No team, no assistants, just me. It had taken months, years, really, to learn how to sit in a room and not seek approval, to lead without softening myself to make others comfortable, to speak last and mean every word. I didn't trust easily now. But that didn't make me bitter. Just calibrated. Back at my desk, a delivery waited, a heavy envelope with no sender name. My assistant said a courier had dropped it off by hand. Inside, a printed article from the local news, headline bold across the top, siblings-in-law charged with conspiracy, and attempted poisoning in corporate sabotage plot. The photo showed Craig, hunched in court, Marla hiding her face behind her hair, no note, no signature, just a red circle around one sentence. Both defendants claimed it was never meant to harm her permanently. I folded the page, placed it in the shredder without a second glance. Intent didn't matter, only impact. That night, I walked home, refused the car service. The air was cool. A breeze drifted through the high-rises, brushing against my collar like breath. Somewhere on the edge of the city, people were sitting down to dinner, laughing, drinking coffee. I passed a cafe, the kind I used to meet Craig at during the early years. When we still shared secrets, not silences. When he still looked at me like I was a challenge, not a competitor to eliminate. Funny how quickly admiration becomes threat. How easy it is for love to sour into sabotage. My phone buzzed. A new email. Subject sentencing update. I didn't open it. I knew what it would say. Knew the years. The plea deal Marla had accepted. The maximum Craig would face. The parole timeline. But none of it mattered. Their punishment wasn't the bars. It was the memory of me walking away untouched. Not ruined. Not silenced. Just gone. With everything they wanted still in my hands, I stepped into my apartment, closed the door, locked it. Then, without turning on the lights, I stood in the quiet, listened to it. This silence wasn't heavy. It was earned. 1 year later, I stood backstage at the National Marketing Summit in San Francisco, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the podium. The lights beyond the curtain were bright, the kind that cut across rows of executives and students alike, all craning their necks toward the stage where I was about to speak. I didn't feel nervous. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew who I was now. Not a survivor. Not a victim. A strategist. A woman who watched every piece fall. And instead of screaming, rearranged them into something stronger. A stagehand gave the signal. I stepped out. Polite applause followed. A few knowing looks from colleagues who'd followed the story. A few wide-eyed stares from young women in the audience who had likely read every thread, every breakdown of the trial, every opinion piece headlined "The Quiet Revenge of Helena West." I ignored all of it. I didn't show my teeth. Just a soft, closed lip smile. Calm. Absolute. Good morning, I said into the mic, my voice steady. Before I talk to you about brand strategy and emotional equity, let's talk about silence. A few heads tilted. Silence is not weakness. It's not fear. It's not indecision. It's observation. The most powerful moves I've ever made began with silence. I let the pause breathe. In a world that rewards speed, noise, and visible dominance, silence is mistaken for absence. And that's where people go wrong. The words came naturally now. I didn't have to rehearse the narrative. It was written into my marrow. I spoke for 40 minutes. About communication and psychology, about positioning, about how brands like people lose power when they chase validation instead of vision. I layered it with data, with insight, but underneath it all, there was a deeper current, and they felt it. When I closed, I didn't thank them for their time. I said power isn't always loud, always, and justice isn't always public. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's evolution. And I walked off stage. They stood. I didn't turn to see it. But I heard the sound rise, footsteps, clapping, murmurs of something unexpected. They weren't applauding the presentation. They were applauding the proof. Later, at the networking gala, someone tapped my shoulder. She couldn't have been older than 24, wide-eyed, holding a notebook to her chest like a shield. I'm sorry to interrupt. She said, I just wanted to say, your story, it changed the way I see everything. I used to think I had to be agreeable to survive. Now I know I just have to be alert. I nodded once. That was enough. More than enough. Because that's what strategy does. It doesn't demand attention. It shifts perception. I left the gala early. At home. I took off the heels, the blazer, the performance. Walked barefoot to the kitchen. Made tea, not coffee. I hadn't touched coffee since the brunch. The apartment was clean, sparse, nothing unnecessary. No framed wedding photos, no expensive decanters, just books, tools, things that served me. Nothing that needed to be kept out of guilt or nostalgia. The clock read 10:44 p.m. I sat at my desk and then opened my laptop. There it was, an unread message. Subject line, multi-year renewal, confirmed. It was from the client Craig, and Marla had tried to poach. Not only had they stayed, they'd locked in a 5-year partnership. Unprecedented. I stared at the screen, not smiling, just still. Next to the email, another notification, a scheduled post, an article about the trial, written by a journalist who had followed the case from the beginning. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read the words to know what they said. The world could debate the ethics, the cunning, the coldness. But I knew the truth. I hadn't won because I was angry. I hadn't won because I was clever. I had won because I was ready. Because every time they underestimated me, I watched and I waited. And when the moment came, I didn't explode. I executed. The article did go viral, not just among industry circles, but beyond, shared in quiet group chats, women's forums, corporate gossip chains. Some called it the blueprint, others, a cautionary tale. I didn't comment. I never gave an interview. Let them fill the silence with speculation. It always sounded better coming from their mouths than mine. But I noticed something. The women who reached out, the ones who found me, not through PR, but through instinct, they didn't ask for advice. They didn't want step-by-step vengeance. They asked one thing: how did you stay calm? I always answered the same way. I didn't perform calm. I became it. Calm was no longer the mask. It was the armor, the strategy, the message. A month after the sentencing, I received an invitation, a private alumni event at the university where Craig and I first met. His name still lingered on their donor list, buried now beneath headlines and scandal. I stared at the RSVP for days before responding. I said yes. I wore black again. Not because I was grieving, but because black does not apologize for itself. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It absorbs. It waits. Like me. The event was uneventful. Smiling faces, champagne, conversations that danced around what had become public record. But in one corner of the garden, near the trimmed hedges and hanging lights, I saw her, Craig's ex-girlfriend from college, the one before me, the one who'd warned me once, in a bathroom stall, with mascara-stained cheeks, and a voice, so raw I didn't believe her. We locked eyes now. She raised her glass. I nodded once. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. It's strange how much lives in silence. When you stop needing to explain yourself. Later that evening, I wandered the hallways of the campus center. Found the Wall of Honors. My name was there now. A new plaque, recently added. Helena West, Strategic Communications Excellence, Class of 2009. Below it, the school motto etched in brass through truth, strength. I brushed a finger across it. Funny. I thought, sometimes truth isn't loud. Sometimes strength isn't force. Sometimes both wear heels and hold a glass of poisoned coffee without flinching. I didn't stay long after that. Slipped away before dessert. Walked to the curb where my driver waited, engine purring like a cat that knew not to ask questions. On the ride home, my phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. One line of text. Do you ever miss him? No name. But I knew the number. Knew it before I even opened the message history. It was Marla's burner. She must have had access in her pre-sentencing days. Or maybe someone forwarded the question on her behalf. A final reach from the sinking to the surface. I stared at the screen, then typed slowly, no. I miss who I thought he was. But she never existed. Blocked. Deleted. I turned off the phone and leaned my head against the window. It was raining now, just a light drizzle. Street lamps turned every drop into silver threads on the glass. The city blurred and shimmered. And I thought back to that brunch, to the cup, to the switch, to the moment I stopped surviving and started rewriting. That wasn't revenge. That was reclamation. They say time softens everything. The sharp edges of betrayal, the sting of injustice, even the memory of the worst day of your life can start to feel like a faded bruise. But I don't believe in forgetting. I believe in cataloging, in preserving, not to relive it, but to remember how far you've come. To know, deep in your bones, that you didn't just survive. You dismantled the architecture built to cage you. Quietly, precisely. And then you rebuilt every year, on the anniversary of the brunch. I do the same thing. I wake early. No alarm. I brew tea, jasmine, nothing bitter. I take the morning off, no meetings, no interviews, no calls. And I sit at the small table on my balcony overlooking the city. I let the silence stretch. Then I open a folder, not digital, a real one. Leather-bound, kept in a fireproof safe. Inside a photo of that brunch table, a screenshot of Craig's face in the moment he realized Marla drank the wrong cup. A copy of my medical records. A copy of hers. The court summary. The sentencing documents. And the email I sent my lawyer that morning. It's starting now. I never reread the full transcript. I don't need to. But I hold that phrase in my mind for a while. Because that's the moment I changed. Not when Craig was arrested. Not when Marla collapsed. Not even when the court called it a criminal conspiracy. No. The real moment of transformation was before all of that, when I chose to see clearly, when I stopped explaining away the pain, when I said enough. That choice was mine, no one else's, and that's the thing they never expected. They planned for my breakdown, my retreat, my silence, as surrender. They didn't understand silence as strategy. Now a new name sits beside mine on the agency door, a junior partner I mentored over the past year, sharp, steady, quiet in all the right ways. She watched everything, took notes, not just on marketing, but on power, on presence, on how to survive a fire without smoke. She once asked me what it felt like, walking through all of it, the betrayal, the trial, the aftermath. I didn't give her some speech about pain or strength. I said, imagine walking through a storm in a silk dress. You don't run, you don't scream. You just keep walking. Because you know the wind can't tear you apart unless you stop. That was all. She understood. These days, I rarely speak of Craig or Marla. Their names don't live on my lips. They're not part of my narrative anymore. They're a footnote, a warning. Not because I erased them, but because I outlived them. Their legacies stopped. When the cameras shut off, when the verdict was read, when the story left the headlines, mine didn't. Because mine was never about revenge. It was about clarity. It was about control. It was about walking back into the fire they set for me unburned. This morning, another email arrived. It was short, dry, corporate. Crescent Edge confirms contract extension, 5-year renewal approved, budget increase pending final proposal. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because of what it represented. The client Craig and Marla tried to steal, the pitch they tried to sabotage, the contract they believed was too big for me to carry alone. Now, it was mine. Entirely. Without whispers behind my back. Without a shared signature. Just Helena West. Lead strategist, sole architect, undisputed. I closed the laptop slowly, fingers lingering over the edge. No rush, no reaction. I walked to the kitchen court and poured a glass of water. The mail had arrived, stacked neatly on the entry table. In the middle of the pile, a manila envelope. Unmarked, hand-delivered. Inside, folded with quiet finality, was a copy of the sentencing article I had refused to read. The headline screamed in bold, familiar font convicted Craig West and Marla Dean. Sentenced for conspiracy to sabotage executive partner. The subheading, smaller. Precise victim declines to comment. Declines to attend sentencing? They used the word victim. It didn't sit right with me. I wasn't a victim. I was the architect of their consequences. Still, I read the article. This time, deliberately. Craig's sentence, 5 years, no parole for 3. Marla's deal, 18 months served in full, plus probation. Neither cried in court. No public apologies. No tears for the cameras. Just the sterile removal of reputation. The quiet dismantling of power. Exactly the way I wanted it. No explosions, no drama. Just gravity doing its work. I folded the article and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. It didn't need to stay visible. Just close. That afternoon, I stood by the window of my office as the sun set behind the skyline. The same city where it had all started. Where I had once thought love was a shield. That marriage meant loyalty. That silence meant safety. I know better now. Justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like endurance. It looks like walking past the same room where they plan to erase you and smiling at the emptiness they left behind. I reached for my pen, wrote one last note in the folder I now call closure. The best revenge isn't what you do to them. It's what they can't do to you anymore. And I closed it. There was no need for an ending. Only continuation. Only power. Quiet. Sharp. Untouchable. Mine. A week later, I received an invitation I hadn't expected. Not from a colleague, not from a publication, but from a foundation, a private nonprofit focused on corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. They wanted me to speak, not about branding, not about strategy, about survival. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I was sipping poisoned coffee at a family brunch, suspected of being too fragile to deliver a pitch. Now, they wanted me to teach a room full of CEOs how to spot wolves in tailored suits, how to recognize the quiet strength they all too often overlook in their boardrooms and bedrooms. I said yes, but only on one condition: no live questions, no follow-ups, no media. They agreed. On stage, I told them what I'd learned, not through textbooks or executive retreats, but through months of erasure, gaslighting, invasion of trust. I spoke not about the poison in the cup, but the poison in the culture, the slow, insidious belief that some people deserve to wield power, while others are expected to absorb the fallout with a smile. They asked for a final thought. I gave them this. Be careful how you treat the quiet ones, because silence is not submission, it's surveillance. The room held its breath. That night, I walked home without a coat. The chill in the air didn't touch me. I had become something else. Not invincible, just immune. I passed a bookstore and saw my name on the spine of a new release, a business anthology. Chapter 12, The Helena West Framework, Strategic Detachment in Times of Crisis. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to read what others said about me. I lived it. Back home. The balcony door was open. A warm breeze moved through the apartment like a ghost brushing past silk. I left the lights off, sat on the couch, and let my eyes adjust to the dark. No noise, no chaos, just the hum of the city outside. And I thought of that morning, the one where Craig stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, voice too soft, too sweet. He thought that moment was his win. He didn't realize he'd just given me everything I needed. The truth, the leverage, the reason to stop loving him, and the permission to start choosing myself. I haven't spoken to him since the trial. Haven't replied to the letters he tried to send from prison. Didn't attend the restitution hearing. Didn't sign the divorce papers with emotion. Just a date. A signature. A silence. He'll serve his time. Maybe he'll change. Maybe not. But I won't be there to find out. Marla moved away after probation, changed her last name, deleted her profiles. But I know where she is, and because I'm watching. Because people like her always resurface. In new circles. With new stories. With versions of the truth that fit their comfort, and that's fine. Let her tell them I was cruel, that I overreacted, that I was cold. Cold kept me alive. Cold carried me through fire. Cold turned a weapon meant to destroy me into a mirror that burned their masks off. And now I live differently. No more performing softness for those who mistake it for weakness. No more explaining intuition to people committed to misunderstanding it. No more apologizing for taking up space, asking questions, refusing to disappear quietly. Now, I take my meetings on my terms. My friendships are fewer, but sharper. I no longer chase love, I watch for it. Like a strategist watching the board, I let people reveal themselves. Then I decide who deserves to stay. And when I see another woman doubting her instincts, second-guessing the sickness in her gut, the bruises no one else can see, I say nothing. Not at first. I let her speak. Then, when the silence gets heavy, I say trust it. The unease. The feeling. The flicker. It's not paranoia, it's prophecy. That's the gift betrayal gives you. A second sight, And once you have it, you never walk into a room the same way again. You don't just enter, you survey, you assess, you prepare. Because the best revenge was never about hurting them. It was about becoming someone they couldn't even reach. Thank you all for listening to my story until the very end. I hope that even just a little, what I've shared can bring something meaningful to you. Goodbye, and see you again.